How is everybody doing?
Wonderful.
All right, I'd like to see a little energy here.
A little bit, the other day.
My name's Nancy Waring, and I'm going to be speaking on empowerment, and you are what you think. And I want to start out by telling you a story about someone who was born. This was many years ago. And he had a speech delay, and he didn't speak till he was 4 years old. And then, as he got into school, he was a slow learner. And he had a lot of struggles in school, and he was awkward. He had some sensory problems. He wasn't very social. When he got to up to the college time, as he moved on to college, he didn't get accepted to the university at first. It took him to the next year. He graduated, he couldn't even find a job. He was a person who thought in pictures, he obsessed on things, and had poor social skills. Probably, if he were born today, he would be given a diagnosis of autism. But he grew up in a time when you didn't have those diagnoses. Anybody know who I'm talking about? He is the icon for genius in this world. He's changed the way we see the world and the universe around us. Anybody?
Stephen Hawking.
No.
Albert Einstein.
Einstein. Albert Einstein. And one of the things that he said, he has many wonderful quotes, is that the world is a product of our thinking. If we're going to change it, we have to change our thinking. And then I started to think about him in the world of disabilities. And what would it have been like if he were born today, instead of 1879, if he was born in 1979? He definitely would have been given a diagnosis. He would have been put through the system. He would have been in the system. He probably would have had a paraprofessional. He probably would have had a different therapist. He would have probably had psychiatric care. And that's sort of what we've done. And would he have been able to bring out his genius? Oh, you might be wondering, why am I sort of passionate about this? I need, for full disclosure, I am not a rehab person. My background's speech pathology, and I'm going to share some of that in my story. But first and foremost, I'm a parent of 2 children with mental health disorders. And depression was a fine diagnosis to have. I understood what to do with depression and seeing the psychologist. What I wasn't prepared for was when my daughter said to me, "Mom, I have something very serious to tell you." "Okay, you can tell me." "Gotta promise not to tell anybody." "Sure." She told me that nocturnal animals are poisoning the air that we breathe and the water that we drink. She was 15 years old, a sophomore in school. What do you do? I happened to have a psychologist who was treating her who knew about alien abductions. He said she didn't learn that on the internet. The next 8 months, my world changed. The last thing I was empowered, or my daughter was empowered. We were disempowered. She was identified. Everything was based on her disability. Every single behavior. It was never the medication. It was never anything else. So here my daughter, I was looking forward to college. What's going to happen to her? I slowly saw her sort of slipping away. I didn't see that same person. I lost that power. My world had changed. And I didn't know how to think about it. And slowly I became a little bit more educated. Here I am, a therapist. I've worked with lots of families, individuals of all ages, but not in the mental health area. So I got more educated. Then I became the pain in the butt parent. I questioned everything. I questioned the doctors, I questioned the educators. So what was going to happen to my daughter, who I loved, who was bright, who was beautiful, and she had a future, when they're telling me that, you know, she might be staying in the hospital a long time and then residential care. What was I going to do? And I remember after 8 months of this, in and out, when I went to take her finally from the last placement, and she tried to elope that day. So I get to the doctor, the psychiatrist said, "I have something to tell you. I really think you've got to increase your daughter's medication." Have you seen some of these individuals, some of the people you service who are on these medications? I mean, it's really sad. It's really sad. They want to function, they want to do well, but they can't. You know, they're tired all the time. So he told her she needs more meds. I said, no, I think she needs a different therapist and a different place to go, and I took her out. The story's not about my daughter, but I do want you to know that it's 12 years later. She has an associate degree. She just recently became an interfaith minister. But it's taken a long time, the process, the depression. And she was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. She does not believe she's bipolar. I don't know whether that makes any difference. But then I was also a therapist. So I've worked a lot with individuals of all ages from 12 months through hospice. But with her journey, I started to work with individuals with neurobiological disorders. Things like autism, Asperger's, Tourette's, OCD. And I happened to get a job in a place that believed a child would do well if they can, not if they want to. Very different mindset from thinking that these maladaptive behaviors are just a matter of being defiant. And then I started to work a lot with adults. And that's when it really hit me. All these adults with so many of the adults I work with autism and Asperger's, they couldn't see the strengths and the gifts that I saw in them. I'm working on social skills, social stories, role playing, but they're not feeling good about themselves. And so they were having a hard time. I was giving them therapy, but then they would go home and they'd play their video games. They really couldn't see the opportunities and where their strengths were, even though they had college degrees. They had so many strengths, but they didn't see it. So then I started to incorporate into my therapy empowerment. Nothing like saying to somebody who has a disability, what is a gift of being bipolar? What's a gift of having autism? You know, your dyslexia, things like that. But this group primarily was on the autism spectrum. And at first they looked at me like I was crazy. So when we talked about it, I said, I wish that I knew as much about certain topics as some of you know. Or your attention to detail, I'm not a great speller. And they would tell me anytime I wrote something up on the board when I made a spelling mistake. After a while, I'm like, no, please don't tell me. I know I'm not a good speller. But I said, if you're an editor in a paper or other ways, that is a gift. And eventually they started to change how they were thinking, just through how they were changing the way they thought about themselves. And then one day, one of the young men, he said in the group, he said, I know what I want to be. And there were about 6 of them. I like group dynamics. And they said, what? He said, I want to be an autism advocate. They looked at him like, how could you be an autism advocate? He's like, he looks at me, I look at him. I said, you tell him. He said, because I know autism better as well as anybody else. I'm the right person. And then he went going towards that. So how does that go to this empowerment? We're all, some of us here are individuals with disabilities, some of us are service providers, some of us are both. I actually think we all have something that we try to not let people know, like the spelling mistakes, the ADD, and the distracted mind, like I might have. But we're trying to empower clients. How often have you told your clients, you can do this, you're ready for that job? And they're like, no way, you know, I can't do it. Has that ever happened to anybody in this group?
Yeah.
You know, and part is, I think, particularly when you grow up with it, you've been told, the focus has been on what you can't do, what you need your supports with, what you need help with, why you need your therapy. And now you go from school to the workplace and you're told, you can do it. And they're like, but I can't. I've needed all that support all along. So I feel for us to truly empower our clients, the individuals we work with, as well as themselves. Let's be real. We all want to feel good about ourselves. We all want to grow. We have to bring in what I call our me power. So change that EM to ME, me power. Because before you can be empowered, when somebody can give you that control, you've got to believe it yourself. And that's where our thoughts come in. You've got to have those beliefs that you can do it. You might not know how you can do it, but you've got to believe and trust those people who are around you that they're going to help you. So as professionals, part of what we're trying to do is to get people to see their strengths and see their abilities so that they can sort of buy into what we're telling them that they can do. I don't know about you, but I find my daughter could tell you if one of her teachers liked her. The individuals I know, they are a radar for who loves them, who cares for them, who respects them. If you don't have that relationship, you're going to get absolutely nowhere. So really, those individuals you work with, really see where their strengths, where their abilities are, because often they have come from a place. We live in a world where we tend to be very negative. We're diagnosing everything. When the DSM-5 came out, they said over 50% of the people can get a diagnosis under that. That means 50% of you or more have a disability in this room. Because we're just very narrow, so we have to sort of step out of that box. So I have a few strategies or things that I want to bring up, whether it's your own self-empowerment and goals you have, or for those individuals. One is the use of something like a vision board. And I call it that Me Power board. That board that you're going to take things from your past that you've really done well and you feel really good, and when you see it, it's like, yes, I've done it. I ran a marathon. There wasn't anything like what it felt like when I crossed that finish line. I was in pain, but I achieved a goal I didn't even think of. So when I need power, I always go back to that if I can go from 3 miles to 26.2 in 4 months, I can do anything. That was empowering. So tap into those things that were your own empowering moment, or for those individuals you're working with. And then look at where their future is. What do they want to do? Do they want to, the college graduates, and do they want to work in a traditional office? Get a picture of somebody doing the job that they want. Cut their face off and put their face on it. Have them see it. Because if you don't believe it, you won't think it. And if you don't think it, if it hadn't been in your thoughts, you're not going to do it unless you got somebody pulling you the whole time. Which, does it sometimes feel like you're pulling somebody? No? Yes? I'm not from Philly, but when I saw the homeless individuals, I'm very sad because I really think that they don't think that they have anything else, at least at that moment, than that, to offer them the security or to try to have a place for their family. And I found that was very, very sad. Again, I do believe everybody wants to feel interconnected with other people and to feel valued. So the first is like that me board. The two is affirmation, saying positive things, but becoming very specific. So it could be, I am blank, and then because. So I would say, I am healthy because I eat organic foods every day. Or somebody might say, I am a great employee because I go to work on time, and I am there, and I get my job done. With those individuals who you work with, if you're trying to change the way they think and to value themselves, tap into even the littlest things to give them that light so that they can feel really, really good about themselves. What I loved about this conference is how everybody's been discussing your support system. Whether it's your job coach, whether it is your family member, whether it's your teachers, whether it's your friends, because that's another key part of this empowerment and people feeling good about themselves, is to be around people who make you feel good. I've told people, get rid of people in your life. It's easy for me to say sometimes, but really think about it. What value? We can be challenged. We don't have somebody to have to be our cheerleader. We want somebody who's going to make us become our best self, authentic self, particularly the individuals we're working with. And I just want to give some examples of, I think we have to be able to tap into where some of our weaknesses are and how that has brought us to being the people that we are today, or to help the individuals that we're working with to lead the life that they want. So I have a friend of mine, and these are not like the Einsteins in terms of people I don't know. I have a friend, Richard Cherney. He's PhD, has cerebral palsy and a severe learning disability. His tenacity, he spent 18 years getting his degree to become a PhD. I don't know, but I don't know whether I could have done that. He didn't give up. His life experiences have helped him and bring him to that point. I had a boss who was the most ADHD person you could imagine. If he came in here, you would feel the energy of him. And he'd be probably telling the group, hey, I've got ADHD, as well as dyslexia. And what did he do? He took one student who said, I need a place because I can go into a traditional school system. I have Tourette's and OCD. And he started a school for kids with neurobiological disorders. And he empowers those kids. We don't have any behavior chart. It's, as professionals, we were looking at, sort of how are we going to build up the self-esteem and the confidence of these kids who come in, who've been bullied both by teachers as well as with kids and other problems that they had. And I have another friend, the last one that I'm going to talk about, and then I'm almost done. And his name is Eric Price. And Eric, he was diagnosed at the age of 32. He thought he was ADHD, but he was diagnosed with autism. And he had a dream. He's an artist. He had a dream. He wanted to have an art center for individuals with disabilities to paint and to do sculpture. He asked a friend of his who had an abandoned garage if he could use that garage. So he started with one student there. He was having a hard time holding down jobs, and that's how I met him. I was his boss. This person has developed something called the Spirit of Huntington, and I'm so proud of Eric as my boss, as a friend of mine, out of his dream. This was his gift, whether it was Richard, my boss Kevin, or Eric. They tapped into what was their strengths, their passions, and their abilities, and they took that, and they're just wonderful people who are really leading a life by their terms. So in conclusion, I want to leave you with a quote from Albert Einstein, and some of you may know this one. Everyone is a genius. But if a fish judged itself by its ability to climb a tree, it would spend its life thinking it was stupid. Now go out there, find your genius, and bring the genius in everybody whose lives you touch. Thank you.